Now, as we find out more and more details about Daredevil Born Again, it is becoming super clear. This really was going to be the seeding of a street-level Marvel Universe. We've got a full breakdown on one of the storylines that might be trimmed, but it does provide some great insight into the series and how many new heroes might actually show up. Well, like we've been talking about, Daredevil Born Again, at least in its current iteration, has currently been scrapped by Marvel Studios. In case you didn't know, the entire creative team was fired, and apparently only a few scenes that have been shot will make it into the final version that is yet to be produced. Now, before we dive into this story, I want to be clear, there could be some major spoilers, because many of these elements are likely to make it into whatever version ultimately shows up on Disney+, and what they rework, well, we don't know yet. So this is your warning. Now, we've been learning a lot about the show, and the reasons for Matt Murdock dropping the Daredevil mantle. Now, what we found out was the death of Foggy Nelson and potentially Karen Page played very big in Matt Murdock giving up the suit and not showing up for almost half of the first 9-episode season. We also found that this was more a legal procedural, think Law & Order, than a superhero series, and the show was described, I kid you not, as boring and sleep-inducing, meaning for this to leak out, it must have been really, really bad. Now, that's not to say everything we've heard is bad so far, and I have to say I like some of the elements I'm hearing and what they were trying to do, just this path wasn't working. Now, earlier this month, we actually heard that the trial of the White Tiger was going to be the show's first big arc, with Matt Murdock taking on the vigilante as a client after he stopped a mugging. Now, this really wasn't a mugging, because in reality, these muggers were actually corrupt cops, and one of them dies during the scuffle, leading to White Tiger being deemed a cop killer. Now, apparently, this is the Hector Aya version of the character, not his daughter, and those rumors of Jenna Ortega being cast in this series might have been a little bit overblown, but it turns out the White Tiger was indeed part of the initial run. Now, earlier today, we got a pretty interesting report, but it doesn't come from Marvel Studios or a trade like Variety, but it does come from Can We Get Some Toast? Now, you know how we feel about anonymous scoopers on this channel, but it seems like a lot of these details that have been coming out about Daredevil, well, they're turning out to be true, and all of this makes a lot of sense. Now, according to Toast, in the series, Matt Murdock would have tailed the surviving cop to find the informant as a witness for Hector's trial. After finding the informant, Matt would actually try to take his place to save them. Now, the corrupt cops are surprised to find Matt waiting for them, but they don't care that he's the informant's lawyer and start to beat him up until a gun is pulled and the devil is ultimately unleashed. Obviously know who's going to win this hand-to-hand combat, and in the aftermath, Matt notices that the Punisher logo was tattooed on one of those cops that was currently knocked out. And this is what sets up the next arc, or likely the second half of Daredevil Born Again. Now, bringing the White Tiger into the MCU sounds like a great idea, and I'm totally down for that. But I have to say, I can kind of see where if this was a legal procedural, this really wouldn't work. The first series of Daredevil opened up establishing how awesome the character of Daredevil is. That first episode gave us some of the most iconic scenes ever, and if this show started out in a sleep-inducing format, well, that is really, really bad news. Like we said, we love the idea of the White Tiger being part of the series, and I hope they keep elements of this trial of the White Tiger storyline. But I don't think anybody is down for waiting that long for Matt Murdock to show up in costume, and this is a superhero series, not Law & Order Hell's Kitchen, and I think doing it this way really would prove to be a big problem. Now, there are a couple of things I do like here, though. The fact that the two main storylines are focusing on White Tiger and the Punisher, well, this seems to confirm that Kevin Feige was planning or is planning to use this show to seed heroes in the streets of New York. As it stands right now, we already have Daredevil, Frank Castle, and Spider-Man roaming the streets of New York City and putting criminals in check. But I suspect the whole series was going to kind of focus on several more classic Marvel street heroes, bringing them to life and associating them with Daredevil for some of the future plans that are going to clearly focus on a final showdown with the Kingpin. Now, like I said, the storyline might be totally scrapped, and it might just go down in history as something of legend we'll never get to see. Marvel's completely reworking the series, which isn't rumored to come out until January of 2025, so there is plenty of time to actually give the series a full-on rewrite, so many of these elements might not make it into future versions. I suspect that they have several episodes shot and they want to keep some scenes. Some of it might move forward, but ultimately if the White Tiger shows up to team up with the Man Without Fear, we're going to have to wait and see.